Hello, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. I'm Samaddar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America about? You see, American identity is about freedom, the opportunity for a better life, and the pursuit of happiness. However, most Americans are not free when it comes to the financial front. Most Americans are suffering from financial slavery due to loss of jobs, stagnant wages, inflation, and debt of all kinds. Wealth and income inequality runs rampant across America, and the middle class is all but disappeared. So what is Extraordinary America about? Extraordinary America is about the abolition of financial slavery. It is about the financial freedom of the 99%. It is about the nation of immigrants and descendants of immigrants awakening and unleashing the extraordinary within themselves and setting themselves free. The path to financial freedom is through entrepreneurship and investing on the light side. It is about financial education, not only when it comes to money in the monetary systems, but also in regards to how to start a business, investing, especially when it comes to precious metals and real estate. In this podcast, I interview guests, many of whom came from humble beginnings, to see how they did it and how they attained financial freedom in their own lives and how they did business. And it is my hope that you will be inspired and you will want to awaken extraordinary within yourselves and realize the American dream. Once again, welcome to Extraordinary America. Kim, are you there?
I am, Cosmos, and thank you so much for having me on and allowing me to share some time with you and with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Kim, thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast with me. So, Kim, can you tell me, the audience, a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you got started?
Yeah, so how I got started is very different to how I've ended up. So I left school to be a hairdresser when I was 15, and that was going to be my career. I set my first business up at 18, and then I had to have a career change at 24 because I had a severe allergy to promotion, would you believe? So I ended up having to give up, sell the salon, sold it to somebody who worked for me, and they still run it today. And I spent the next 25 years in mainly financial services and IT software, made it up to board level, then started doing transformational roles. So going into organizations that had areas of them that were broken and needed fixing. And that often meant that combination of the technical side, but a big piece on the people side simultaneously. So how do you get the mindset ready for significant change? And how do you take businesses from underperforming to real growth? So I've worked for some fascinating organizations and been involved in some amazing transformations, which has been great. And then 6 years ago, I decided to set up on my own. So requalified as an executive coach, qualified in lots of body language and facial expression stuff to really help harness what's really going on in the room to enable you to really make successful inroads into where it is you want to head. And at that point, I also was given the opportunity to take part in some books, started as I very fortunate to be an Amazon bestseller for 3 books. And then I got the opportunity to do my TEDx, which was actually on the power of belief and how we can use belief for ourselves and for our people to really make significant change. And I guess that kind of brought me around to where I am today.
Well, so Kim, can you tell me a little bit more about your strategic vision of how, like, from like the beginning when you first got started, and then like to like where you're now, and how it evolved over the years to where you're now an executive coach and you're helping people transform?
Of course. So when I started out, my dream in life was to have a whole host of hairdressing salons, to be like, the next big thing on brand. And so I worked really hard at making sure that I got all my qualifications, that I went and did everything that I could. I understood my market, set my business up, as I say, at 18. And that was going really well until, unfortunately, my health said you can't do that anymore because of this severe allergy. So the next part wasn't very strategic, if I'm honest, Cosmos. It was tactical. So I got a temporary job as a cashier in a bank while I worked out, what do I do now? My vision has been taken away and I need a new vision. So it was supposed to be a tide me over, but I loved it. And I got really engrossed with just the art of the possible. And I was like, okay, well, I couldn't get to the top of where I wanted to be in hairdressing, but my ambition hasn't changed. So now how do I get to the top of where I want to be in financial services? And I had, I guess, on paper, what you would class as being something that would hold me back. So, in financial services, most people that are in it and that are senior have got great degrees, they've got fabulous A levels. My MVQ in hairdressing really wasn't up there as a substantial benefit when you were going for future jobs. So I decided I just had to learn everything. So I became passionately curious about anything I could possibly learn. And that's probably been my number one skill throughout all of it, which is, well, I'll just learn how to do it. I'll learn how that technology works. I'll learn how to get better at people. And really started to build my plan, which is I want to be back. I felt like I'd been set back at 24 to now have gone back in at entry level. So I set my first goal, which was to be back in management within 18 months. And then worked really hard at, okay, hit that goal. Then what's my next one? And as I grew and developed a little bit more, what I now realize is what I have always is my 5-year vision. So in 5 years, I want to be here. And then if I want to be there in 5 years, where do I need to be in 3 years to know that I'm on track for that trajectory? And then if I want to be there in 3 years, what do I absolutely have to do in the next 12 months? And that 5-year one would probably be a little bit more high level. The 3-year one is bringing in a little bit more detail. And the 12-month plan is very detailed. It is, these are all the things you need to do to ensure that I'm keeping myself on track and also holding myself to account, because I think that's one of the big skills to get is how do we become our own accountability buddy? And part of that is learning how we set the direction in where we want to go. So our brain is kind of like a sat nav. Wherever we tell it is where it's going to go. So for me, one of the most important things is making sure that I'm really clear where I'm going. Because if I'm really clear where I'm going, then actually my subconscious brain will start to filter into view opportunities that are going to help me get there faster. And that was probably my big learn halfway through my career, which was I wasn't looking far enough ahead. I was looking at, okay, the plan says I've hit this one. What's the next level in the organization right now? I want to do that one. And that worked, but it was quite slow in comparison to when I started setting my vision. I was able to therefore make a couple of leaps where actually I didn't go the next step. I went around it and went to the one above it, because actually I was able to set my sights a little bit higher and develop the skills that made me more unique, and therefore people wanted you in that role, because it's unusual to have people that can do the technology, the finance, and the people piece. Usually you excel in one or the other.
So Kim, you brought up a very interesting point, and it's the concept of the 5-year plan, the 3-year plan, and the 12-month plan. Most of the people like who are doing like jobs and all of that, they tend to, for lack of a better word, they don't have a plan. They're just going day by day and all that. But basically, they're in order to for like most people that are successful, they do have like all these 3-month plans, 6-month plans, 12-month plans, 3 years and 5 years. So can you tell, for the sake of the audience, like how do you plan so many years ahead, and how would you go advising somebody to plan that much years ahead when there's so many changes that can happen in life? There's so many curveballs that can happen, because you know how life is as well as I do, like just things happen, right? So
Yeah.
how would they go about creating a plan like that, and also take into account all the different changes in their life?
Great question. And I think for me, that's why the detail of the plan is a little bit, is a different level. Because for when you're looking 5 years out, you don't know how many plot twists life's going to throw at you to get there. So it's thinking about kind of those big things. So, for me, for example, when I set my business up, it was in 5 years, I want to have a team that works for me. I want to be able to work around my little girl and be able to get that real work-life balance. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but that was where I set my 5-year planner. But if I wanted to be there in 3 years, I really needed to have started to recruit my team. And therefore, in my 12 months, it was, okay, what do I need to do? Well, I need to bring in enough business to be able to cover my outgoings and extra, so that I'm then able to start finding them. I need to start to identify what tasks do I need to do? Because actually, either they're the things that are the things that bring me joy, or I have to do them because actually I'm just the best at them. And then you've got to go through, what are the things that you could delegate, even if you can't delegate them today? What are the things that you'd like to delegate? And because that starts to get you a plan towards how you get ready to hand those over. And for me, this is the one that I didn't learn until probably the last 10 years. What are the things I need to dump? Because actually they had no value to me and they had no value to my clients, but they've just become a habit. They've just become things that I do all of the time. So when I'm working with clients, we kind of start with, and the question I would ask, if you could do magic, where would you be in 5 years? And the reason I say that if you could do magic is when they come back with all the reasons why you couldn't get there, I'm like, no, because you can do magic. We're not talking about the obstacles at the moment. We're talking about where it is you want to go, because that will allow us to pull them up. And you want to have places where you can have regular reviews to go, what risks, so in my 12-month plan, I'll have what risks are there that this won't go the way that I wanted it to. But what opportunities are there that it could go any better? It could go even better than I thought. I could get further ahead than I wanted to. And then every 3 months, I have a look at it and go, how many of the risks actually came into play? How many of the opportunities came into play? Do I need to tweak anything in my 12-month outlook so that I can ensure that I'm still on track for success? But it really is starting to do that thinking. And there was a study, and forgive me, I can never remember if it was Harvard or Stanford that did the study, but they did a study, and they obviously 100% of the people talked about, have you got a goal? And only 87% of people didn't have a defined goal. They didn't know where it was that they were going. 13% had the goal, but only 3% of them had actually written it down and started to come up with an action plan. Even if it was a terrible, terrible, terrible action plan, they'd at least started. 3%. And yet when they came back at the end of the study, that 3% had outperformed the next lot, so the 13%, by tenfold. And the only thing that was different was they had a plan and they'd started thinking about how they could make a move on it. And for me, that really hit home as a, wow, this is like a vital thing to do, not a nice to do. And so when you start to come up with that, and I did those things with things like, I wanted to, before I turned 50, I wanted to have done my TEDx, and I was really lucky. I turned 50 last year. I did the TEDx the year before that. So it was really setting yourself those pieces that said, give yourself a deadline and then start working back from that. So it's like, I want to do it by the time I'm 50. That means I need to start applying much earlier than that, because if not, my chances of success are going to be so much shorter. And I think having those regular reviews allows you to look at what bits need tweaking, because very often we get ourselves held back because something went wrong. It didn't go right. So we throw the whole thing out. But if you really look at what happened, you'll see some bits went well. The overall thing didn't go where you wanted it to, but some bits went well. So how do you keep doing things that went well and look at new ways of doing the things that didn't go so well? And that can be such a game changer. It's often a really small thing that needs to be different.
So Kim, there's so many questions I have to ask you based on this, but one thing that comes to mind is when you're advising your clientele, what is one of the greatest limiting beliefs that you see as a pattern all throughout people that are trying to start their businesses, and what can they do to overcome it?
I think quite another great question. I think for me, one of the biggest obstacles I see with a lot of my clients is that they believe they have to have all of the answers. So they make their life really hard. Because I've now got to know everything, and if I don't know everything, then actually I'm worried I'm not doing enough. And I was definitely guilty of that for a lot of years. But actually, once you get them to realize they don't need to know all the answers, they need to know the best questions. Because if they know the best questions, and they empower their people to give them the answers, you suddenly multiply the power of the brain. So I think it was first talked about in Napoleon Hill's book, where he coined the phrase, the mastermind group. And it talked about the fact that actually when you get together with another group and you allow yourself to not have to own the answer, actually what you do with then the question, then it's amazing what some of those breakthroughs have been and some of the impact that that has, because you've now got the collective power of the brain. And that for me is probably the biggest breakthrough that I see with the leaders that I talk to, which is you've got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You've got to be able to be in the room and go, yeah, I don't know, but actually I know who does know, and I know what question to ask, and I know enough questions to know if they're telling me something that is valid or something that's going to make me ask more questions.
So, Kim, well, I think that the reason why people have that thing where they have to know all the answers, because it's more like an ego thing where they need to feel like they are the most intelligent person in the room. But ironically, it's when we have that humility to know that we don't have all the answers, then that's when. But it's it's simple, but it's also hard at the same time, because like our identity and our egos are based on like accomplishments. A lot of like business people, like for them it's an achievement based thing that's connected to their ego. So do you notice that like when you're dealing with other business people, or is it just something that is relatively rare?
No, I do see that, and it is. We are in a society that judges us on our success, and success looks like being the person that knows the most, being the person that looks the most successful, and that's got worse, hasn't it, with social media? But actually, one of the things that I'm really working on at the moment is if we embrace the power of curiosity, it's amazing the changes it makes in our life. So as human beings, our brains are designed to take us to judgment really quickly. Because they were still designed the way that they were when we were cavemen, and we had to judge, were we going to die or not? So
We do live in a very judgmental society, but I don't know if it's because of evolution biology or not.
Yeah, but that's kind of where we're stuck. So what I now try and do with myself, and I try and teach this with other people, is just get curious. So where your brain will immediately, somebody says something, your brain will decide whether you agree or disagree. Because that's what we're designed to do. And I now go, that's interesting. I wonder why I think that. I wonder why they think that. Well, I wonder if I ask a few more questions, whether or not I may never change my point of view, but actually I'll learn something on the journey. And the other thing that I've learned over the years is our emotional brain actually responds 24 times faster than our thinking brain. So we think we're rational, logical human beings that make all of our decisions based on fact. But the reality is, even when we're given a fact, our emotional brain makes it mean something, and it does that first. So we're now making our thoughts based on whatever we've made that fact mean. And so when we kind of get into that, which is, okay, what's happening and what am I making it mean? Then actually that's where we often find there's the root of real opportunity to do something different, because often nobody's taught us that. So we don't recognize that we're not making the decision based on the facts, but we're making it on our emotional reading of those facts.
So Kim, as a continuation of this, so let's say you're a business person and you're dealing with your clientele, or you're dealing with your customers, or you're dealing in a business deal with another business person. Do you appeal to rational logic, or do you appeal to their emotions more from your perspective, and why?
I think both. So I've always found that actually you both need to work together in perfect harmony. It's almost the augmentation of the two. Because if you're just appealing to their emotions, they'll kind of pass you off as being, oh, it's right for you, you're really fluffy. In fact, I did have somebody say that to me once, and it was like, it's right for you, can you do the fluffy people stuff? And I was like, I do. And that fluffy people stuff's put £600,000 on your bottom line using your statistics in the last 4 months. Would you like me to share with you how? And he was, so it was like, yes, I went through his statistics, but factually how I could prove I'd put £600,000 on his bottom line. And he went, you're not that fluffy, are you? I was like, no, I'm not, because I can't do what I do unless I can do both sides.
But for the audience, what does fluffy mean?
Oh, sorry, fluffy. Fluffy in American. I always forget my Englishisms don't come across. So what's a good description of fluffy? It's somebody who's not very detail orientated, probably isn't very technical, just likes to do the nice creative things.
Okay.
want to do, doesn't want to do anything hard or difficult. So because people skills are classed as soft skills, which always makes me smile, because if they really were soft, why do people find them so hard? And you're like, okay. But actually, you've got to know both sides of that. For me, it's about making commercially astute decisions and then being able to take people on the journey to implement those and get to that success. And you can't do it just with the people skills, because you wouldn't know where you're taking them. And you can't do it just with the technical skills, because people won't follow you. So you need to combine both, and therefore be able to appeal to both. Because again, when we look at this facts and what we've made it mean, everybody in the room is faced with the same fact, but they'll all have made it mean something different. Because what they've made it mean will be based on them, their experience, their ego, how they're invested in the answer. And that's why you end up often with disagreements and conflict. And it's like, but you're talking about the same thing. In fact, sometimes people are violently agreeing, they're just using different words. You're like, okay, we can pull back from that. But for me, when I talk to the clients that I work with, it's very much doing that combination of both. It's like, let's go through all the technical stuff. Let's go all through your finances and make sure that we're making robust decisions that actually have appropriate risk, because if you take no risk, you're not going to get the growth you want, but that also we understand the emotional implication of this. And I guess for me, one of the big ones so I work with a lot of family businesses, or businesses that, the owners now got it to, the tens of millions, want to get it to the next level, but are struggling to get there. And the question I always ask them at the start is, what's your exit plan? And they probably, in at least 95% of cases, when I ask that question, they go, I don't have one. And you're fundamentally flawed, because you're not immortal. So the one thing that is true is at some point you are going to exit, whether you're in control of that exit or you're not. But if you don't have a plan for what that looks like, your business will die when you do. And that's not what you're working towards. So I guess that plays to the emotion, but it also plays to the financials of, why have you done this? And how do we now look at it and say, where are your exits? You could float it, you could sell it, you could pass it on to somebody. You could keep all of those three options open, but once you know where you're working towards, again, you'll make better business decisions that will keep you scalable and saleable. And it just changes the outlook for people.
So Kim, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you connected to this is that, let's say you have like somebody that wants to start a business, and and they want to get it to a 6-figure or 7-figure business eventually, but like they have this idea and they're passionate about it and they want to monetize it. And but the problem is that they don't have the belief that they can get it to a 6-figure or 7-figure, because they've never done it before. It's the first time that they're doing it. How would you go about advising such a person on the step-by-step process to get to that level? What is your opinion of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, what we believe is what we'll achieve. So if we don't believe we can do it, we won't do it. And for me, one of the things that I try and help people with on that belief piece is, the only thing stronger than fear is hope. And yet both of them are imagined. They haven't happened, neither one of them. They're created in the exact same brain. So if I'm hopeful that I'm going to build a 7-figure company, even though I've never done it before, but that's what I hope that I will be able to achieve. That's why I'm setting my business up. And then on the opposite side of that, I'm fearful that I can't do it because I've never done it yet. Both haven't happened. Neither one's happened yet. Both of them were imagined in the same brain. The same person is imagining what they're hopeful for as they are imagining what they're fearful of. So why choose to give what you're fearful of more credibility and more likelihood than what you're hopeful for? Because both of them are equally credible, but whichever one we choose to focus on is the one that's going to happen. So the first piece is really nailing into which one are you choosing? And then start to look at, okay, what are the steps? And if I want to be a 7-figure business in 5 years' time, then actually I'm going to need to be at a minimum of a 6-figure business in 3 years' time. So, okay, what do I want to get to in the first year? Or maybe in that first year, what I want to get to is a 5-figure. And then once I can see that, it's all just incrementals of what bits go well, how can I scale it? Understanding, for me, often it's getting people to see the size of the market. That's a great way of changing your belief. Kind of look at it and they go, well, yeah, I want to do 7 figures, but can I really do 7 figures? And you'll be like, okay, so the industry you're in is projected to be worth £62 billion in 3 years' time. So when we now look at that size of the opportunity, your little 7 figures is a little bit, it's not quite unrealistic, is it? So I think sometimes you've got to change that landscape for people so that you give them more facts that allow them to build that belief. It's the stepping stones of that belief to go, okay, yeah, even if I got to 7 figures, I wouldn't even be 1% of the market share. Now that feels more achievable. In fact, I wouldn't even be 0.5% of the market share. Okay, so it's all about what can you do to break down your fear and give you the positive option the other way, and give yourself those stepping stones. So again, that's why I say it's really important that you've got your plans, because then you can keep revising them if things don't go the way that you wanted to, but also it's really important to take those moments to recognize your successes and take a moment to celebrate them. I often use the analogy of if you were to climb Everest, there's camps along the way for a number of reasons. One, you clearly need to take a rest, but 2, you need to be able to acknowledge how far you've come to give you the motivation to keep going. So I think for me, they're the really important things in it, which is start with the end in mind, and look at it and say, okay, so I've now got my 7 figures. So at the start, day one, I've got a 7-figure business. What's it doing? Who's it helping? What's it achieving? What are they saying? The more color you can put into what that's going to look and feel like, the easier it is to walk back from that and say, okay, so what steps did I take to get here? Because again, it's a trick of the brain, and our subconscious brain doesn't understand help and harm. So if we tell it we can't do something, it will go and give us loads of reasons why we can't, loads of examples why you're right, you can't do that, that's pretty hopeless. But if we start to focus on what it is we do want, where it is we do want to go, it starts to try and filter in ways to help us get that. So all of a sudden we'll start to see some opportunities that come up, or we'll just, have you ever had one of those, like it feels like a eureka moment, and it's a problem you've been dealing with for forever, and all of a sudden the answer pops in, you're like, wow, that was lucky. Actually, that's just our subconscious brain now knows that it's something we're focused on, and so it starts to look for things that it can bring into view to help us to achieve it. So I think it's having that plan, it's having that mindset piece. Sometimes it's about getting the people around you. So one of the things that I talk about for people when they're suffering, for example, with imposter syndrome, is build your thrive hive. So find your 4 or 5 people that you know have got your back. They'll be honest with you. You don't just want them all to be nice yes people that tell you that everything's perfect, but you want them to be people that will be there for you. And I have within mine, they've all got a slightly different role. I've got the person in mind that's going to give me the tough love. That when I'm, wallowing in moments of self-doubt and I can't do this and it's too hard and, life's thrown too much at me, that they're going to tell me to get on with it, pull myself together and just keep going. But then I've got the other person who's going to sugar the pill a little bit. They're going to perhaps give me some tea and sympathy before they tell me to get over it when I'm not quite ready for the tough love. But having those people around you so that you've got an outward voice, because one of the biggest challenges that I see for leaders everywhere is they spend too much time listening to their inner voice, and their inner voice is often not as positive as they'd like it to be. And all that does is diminish that belief.
So Kim, like what you just showed me got me thinking about this parable of the 2 wolves, right? Like this father told his son that they're like 2 wolves in our mind, and then basically one is made out of like love or hope, and the other is fear. And then the son asked the father like which wolf wins, and he's like the one that you feed the most. And that's basically what we have to do with our subconscious mind. But one of the 2 of the greatest things that at least I found amongst all the people that I interviewed and the people I've interacted with, right, during my time interacting with entrepreneurs, is that number one, you have the environment where, like, basically the external environment where you have a bunch of people like family or close friends that give you that negative feedback, and they're not doing it out of tough love. They just don't want you to succeed. And then the other one is like your own self thinking that you're delusional for trying to get to a seven-figure thing for something that you've never done. So from your perspective, how can you combat this twin threat? One, which is the external environment of family and friends, and the other is your own is like your own understanding of what is achievable and what is delusional, because that's something that I found out is a struggle that a lot of people have when they're trying to start their own business.
It is, and and we can be our own worst enemies, and then we follow that by people we surround ourselves with. So our family and friends, we could think they don't want us to succeed. I think it's more they don't want us to fail, and they're afraid to take the risk, and they're afraid for us to take the risk. But it doesn't help because you've then got those parts. That's why for me the Thrive Hive is so important. It's got to be people who believe it can be done. You want to surround yourself with people who've done it as well. So it's great to have people in your Thrive Hive who are already where you want to be, because they know it can be done. They also will have had everybody telling them it couldn't be done, themselves included, but they'll have powered on through that. So I think for me, it's making sure that you are surrounding yourself with people that are either heading where you're heading, or and as well as that, sorry, not or, as well as that, some people that are where it is you want to be. Because they're going to have a different perspective. It's going to be yeah, I felt like that too. But actually what I found was, and I think that's really helpful, because if we, as human beings, we tend to be one of three things is in our style. We're either auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. So auditory, it's about how we hear things, and that's how we create our vision is going to be what we hear, what it's going to sound like, how that fits. If we're visual, it's going to be we see it, we can actually see what's going to go on, and that's where we get it to. Our kinesthetics are your feel, felt, founds. They actually get there based on somebody else felt that way, somebody else found out that it worked, somebody else went and did that. So getting those people into that group that you spend your time with, and for me, I choose where I share what I'm doing. So most of my friends and my family don't really know very much about what it is I do for a living, because that's not it's not what we need from that relationship. It's not going to be our relationship's much more about us and who we are as people and the memories we can create and share. And therefore, because I don't share what my plans are for the business, I get very little of them saying, you can't do that, because they don't know what it is I'm going to do. So I tell them after I've done it. So I've done it, I'll be like, oh, I just got such and such. Like, I didn't know, that's amazing. Whereas I know if I'd have told them I was planning to get it, they wouldn't have wanted me to get my hopes up. So I learned for myself to just compartmentalize where it is that I'm going to for what type of support. So my friends and family who I adore, and they're amazing, are my friends and family, and they support me as a human being and give me love and care and attention, and I do the same for them. But they're not part of my business tribe, or where I'm taking my business to. And that's another thing that I often see with a lot of leaders is they've not made that demarcation. And therefore they do get sucked in. So certainly for people, particularly when they're starting out, reach out to people that are a little bit further ahead than you, and ask them, if they wouldn't mind just jumping on and having a quick coffee. You'd be amazed how many people and who it is that will help you, because they all had somebody help them. They all know what it was like to be in that place where they were like, oh my God, I wish I could just have a chat for half an hour and see what I can learn. So I think the best way around it is to make sure to balance that being in your own head and the naysaying often of close people around you, is to build yourself a network that believes it can be done and is going to support you to get there.
No, I mean, you're actually absolutely right. Like who you're surrounding yourself with and what you allow into your mind is the key. Like it's all about your narrative that you put in your mind, especially your subconscious mind. A lot of people, they don't really take care of what's being filtered into their subconscious mind or not. Like they're just getting input from all different places, but it does affect it. But you have to be very careful and you have to be able to what you can say, like alter it to a way that is basically a positive reinforcement, because you're not going to get it a lot of times from your environment. Like the world, the society that we lived in, as we are talking about, is a pretty judgmental society. It only sees your successes, it does not see your failures and how many times you have to fail to get to where you are. So you have to be the greatest cheerleader for yourself. So
Oh,
yeah.
it's so true, but that's been so true of all the people that have been successful. If you look at them and you look into their history, a lot of them didn't become really successful until much later on. Or I think, was it Thomas Edison who said, I didn't find a way to create the light bulb, I found 10,000 ways not to. Nobody
Totally.
remembers his 10,000 failures. They remember the fact that actually he kept going. I mean, even 10,000, he'd be like, really? But he did, because the belief was there that actually it could be done, and it was important enough that he wasn't going to give up. And I think for me, that's that's the part, is making sure you know why it is you're doing it. And because once you know why it is you're doing it, and for me, added to the why is the who. So I always have, why am I building my business? And who am I doing it for? Well, I'm doing it for me and my little girl, so that we can have a better life and that she can be set up for her future. And therefore, when things get tough, when things get a bit more challenging, I look back at that why and who and go, if is that still really important to me? Yeah, it is. Well, funnily enough, I can dig deeper and I can find a way over whatever the obstacle is, because that's so important to me. And that's back to making sure you've got that driver and picking up the phone to somebody on my driver and going, I just need to borrow 5 minutes of your time. Because sometimes that's all you need, is that energy boost. That's somebody looking at it and going, no, but you can do this. Have you thought about this? Have you considered something else? So I think it is so important that you surround yourself with the right people, and that you give yourself time for introspection, positive and negative. So looking at those things and saying, when your brain tells you can't do something, you can't ignore it, because it's going to keep telling you. So you have to go, okay, I can get this wrong. Then you've got to ask yourself, and actually ask yourself the question, is there any evidence I could get this right? Because what will happen is it will run back into the library of your brain, and it will find all the times where you achieved something you didn't think you were going to be able to achieve, or where you've done something similar and been successful. And then for me, personally, what I started to do when I was changing my mindset was go, Scarlett's my North Star, she's my little girl, and as an openly biased mother, I believe that as long as she's kind and she tries hard, there's nothing in the world that little girl can't do. So I will now say to myself, in those moments of doubt, I can get it wrong. Then I ask the question, can I get it right? Get the new evidence. So with this evidence, I know I can get it wrong. I know I can get it right. If this was Scarlett, what advice would I give her? Well, my advice would be just try. What's the worst that can happen? Just try. Because either you'll succeed or you'll be one step closer to getting there, because you'll know a way that doesn't work. And it's like, if that's what I tell her, that's the advice I have to take. Because that, for me, that was a great way of becoming my own best friend, not becoming my own worst critic. And I'd spent many years in the worst critic camp. So now it's allowing me, in those moments where self-doubt comes in, is to reframe it and take back control.
Wow, Kim, that is awesome. Like the way you go about reframing it and asking what would you advise your younger daughter, and it plays a critical role. And I wanted to ask you because I know you did a TEDx on the power of belief. Could you tell me, the audience, a little bit more about that? Because you and I both know that belief is so important in when it comes to success.
Yeah, it is. And I wanted to share with the audience that actually belief is probably the greatest gift that we can receive. It's the greatest gift we can give. And we don't always think about the fact that we can give it. So back to the piece I said earlier, that what we believe is what we're going to get. and what we're hopeful for and what we're fearful of are equally credible because they were created by the same brain. But actually, belief is the difference. What we believe is going to happen is the crucial piece. It's the key. And when I was really struggling with my own self-doubt at one point, and it didn't matter what external validation I got, what awards I won, or what have you, I'd be there going, if only they knew I was hopeless, then this would get taken away from me. And then I realized in a moment that I was inadvertently making my opinion more valid and more important than these people I aspired to be like. And I was like, that's not true. I value their opinion much more than I value mine. So the change I made was to, when they said something, or when they were demonstrating a belief in me, they were asking me to do something, I'd go, well, they clearly believe I can do it. So I'm going to borrow their belief, and then I'm going to do my level best not to let them down. But I'm already ahead of the game because I'm borrowing their belief. And then I realized you can share the belief. So actually, when we ask somebody to do something, we ask them to do it because we believe they're going to be successful. Because if we didn't think they were going to be successful, we look stupid for trusting them with it, as much as they look stupid for not having got there. So every task, every piece of work anybody gives you, they believe that you're going to be successful. But the piece that I want to share it kind of with the audience is imagine if, when you were given that thing to do, that task, that piece of work, that the person took just a few seconds longer to tell you why they believed you were going to be successful. Imagine the impact that would have. And it's just a few extra seconds. And I've seen it work. I stood up in one organization once, and we had we were going really, really well, going great guns, so well, in fact, that my boss said, Kim, you need to slow us down. Like, you're going to make next year really hard for us if you run at this rate at the well, run the sales team. I was like, that's okay, I'll take everybody off for a CSR event in September. Never happens. And that was all great because we've been going so well. And then that was July, we hit August, and August was not a good month. It was not a good month because, in fact, it was so bad a month that we merged it with September and called it Augtember, and desperately tried to claw ourselves back to the end of the year. And our financial year ended in September. And I remember my boss coming over and going, Kim, you've got to cancel the CSR event. And I was like, I can't cancel it because I've told these people that revenue is not king. Doing the right thing is king. Making sure that we put the customers first is doing the right thing. And if I turn around now, just because it's got a bit uncomfortable, and start driving revenue is king, I'm no use to you. I can no longer lead in this environment. They won't trust me. And he said, yeah, but if you don't hit that number, it will be your job. I went, I get that. I understand if I don't hit the number, I have no job. But if I hit the number your way, I still have no job. So I'd rather go out the way I believe is the right way to go. And so we went ahead with the event. And on the very last day of September, we went into the day and we needed £250,000. And we'd never done more than 180 on a Friday. So it was a big ask, and they were tired. But I remember standing up at the start of the day, and I genuinely believed what I said. I said, if there's any karma in the world, this is the team that's going to achieve it, because you've done the right thing. You've carried on doing the right thing. You've not changed your behavior. And if you don't believe, do me a favor, borrow my belief, because I genuinely believe we're going to do this, because I know how great you all are. And I probably did that shout out 2 or 3 times through the day. We didn't just hit the number, we annihilated the number. We delivered 320,000 on that day. And it went down as being one of the best decisions. But you saw the moment midway through the day where they didn't need your belief anymore because they'd built their own. They'd already got it. And I think, if we bring it back to the simplicity of when we're children. And I was really watching my little girl and her friends when they were learning to walk. And I thought, imagine that for a second. Imagine if tomorrow when you got up, you need to learn how to walk or talk or run or jump or skip. You'd be overwhelmed. We'd all be overwhelmed. And yet at our most vulnerable, we did it. And I say, I wonder why that is. And it comes down, in my opinion, to belief. The first thing is, kids believe they're just like you. They believe because you can do it, they can do it. They just want to be like the people around them. But the second thing, and for me, this was the game changer, is I've yet to see any child learning to walk without a parent or a carer nearby going, come on, you've got this, you're so close. So we quite literally give them our belief to add to their own, and that catapults them to the next part. And if that can get us at our most vulnerable to do something that in our adult life we'd find overwhelming, imagine what it could do if we implemented it every day in every conversation.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I could ask more and more about this, but obviously the hour is coming to a close, Kim. So I wanted to ask a little bit more about the premise of how authentic achievements started. If you could tell the audience a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. So I spent a lot of years desperately trying to fit in and be like everybody else. And that was, it was really hard because it's not really who I am. And then once I realized that it was okay to be me, flaws and all, that doesn't mean I don't need to work on my flaws, but it was okay to have them because that was just going to allow me to be the better version of myself. I decided to be brave enough to be my authentic self. So I worked in these big corporates where I tried desperately to look like the corporate leader I was supposed to be. And yet I'm like a hyperactive puppy dog most of the time. So it's like that was never going to quite work because that's just not my style. And so what I wanted to do with Authentic Achievements was really start to help people find their authentic achievement. Too many times we're out there trying to achieve what somebody else is achieving without knowing, is that going to be what really makes us happy? Is that our measure of success? And how do we start to own our own measure of success and really lead, for me, lead with authenticity. And that means that you've got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You've got to be able to be vulnerable, to create that vulnerability and space for people. You've got to be curious. For me, curiosity is a leadership superpower in how do we do it. So I kind of set up Authentic Achievements. It was going to be that my next book, but that's changing slightly. And then it became my podcast, really to share other people's stories, because I'm hoping that sharing other people's stories of people that have done this, have achieved it, have gone where you want to go, back to what we were saying earlier, which is you want to surround yourself with people that have been there and done it. I wanted to be able to help people that might not have access to these people to be able to access their stories and hear how they overcame it, understand that actually it wasn't an overnight success. There was millions of failings along the way. There were lots of lessons that they learned. And so I set the podcast in the business up a few years ago, and then it became a show on USA Global TV and radio. And I've been so privileged to meet some amazing people and be able to share their stories with a wider audience to go, you know, while I'm learning, you can learn as well. And what an awesome gift to be able to, you know, I pinch myself most days going, how did I get to meet these people? Because I'm so very grateful. But it was my way of being able to hopefully give back and you know, help other people that are starting out to get access to some of this when they need it, because we need to learn some of these hints and tips. We need to learn some of these strategies that are going to help us overcome the challenge. And when you suddenly hear that what you're facing isn't unique, actually lots of other people are facing it too, because we only share our best selves, don't we? You know, we live in I always call it a compare and despair society. So we compare ourselves to the seemingly perfect image of everybody else's life. And then we despair against the messy reality of our own life and how big a gap there is between the two. But we're not sharing when we get things wrong. We're only sharing the best perfect version of ourselves. And so we're not really viewing what's really going on. So for me, that's why I wanted to bring it in there, where people were going to be really honest and say, yeah, it's great now, but it was really ugly along the way. Or there were, you know, I just didn't think I could go on, or this happened and I just didn't know. Because I'm hoping that will motivate or inspire or in some cases give people some knowledge that will allow them to get out of whatever's holding them back and achieve what they want to authentically.
That is amazing, Kim, and your life has been very exciting. I can already tell because you've gone through so many adventures in terms of just business and also self-improvement, and it's just amazing. And Kim, how can our audience connect with you and get to know more about you and your work and everything you do?
Of course, I love it when people get in touch. So you can either find out what we're doing at AuthenticAchievements.com. You can find me on social media either as Kim Adele Randall, or if that's LinkedIn, or Kim Adele 10 on the likes of Instagram and Twitter, etc. And please do reach out. I love to hear people's stories, and I love to see if there's any way that I can help people, because once you get that belief, I promise, it's a game changer.
Kim, thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast with me and inspiring people and making them understand that yeah, belief is everything, and it's our mindset and our strategies and it's our vision setting and our goal setting that makes all the difference in the world. Like I want my audience to know that yes, they can start a business and they can succeed and they can definitely make 6 to 7 figures if they have a process put in place, if they have the certain belief in the mindset. And you've definitely helped with that. And I really appreciate that, Kim. And I do hope you come back at a later time.
Oh, I would love to, and I'm so very grateful that you've trusted me with your time and your audience's time, and I hope it's been helpful. And I would love to come back.
For sure, Kim. And I want to conclude this podcast by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that, hey, look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. And it's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching Exploring America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets us free. Also, remember that inflation is diluting your purchasing power, which in turn increases financial bondage. The practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power and invest in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Lastly, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.